Yo, 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 what's up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to yet again another fantastic indie creator interview. It's your Cape Crusader, Cody, and we're keeping it geekly with our new guest, Tyler Shin Tanner. We're here to break down MEZO, the Trial of Roden, and a little bit of A Wave Blue World. Tyler, how have you been? Welcome to the stream.
Great. Yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah, it's been an exciting time with MEZO #1 coming out yesterday.
And I mean, that is just the tip of the iceberg for you. We have you down for having written The Orphan King, a part of Deadbeats, a musical horror anthology, American Terrorist. And MEZO itself has a decent amount of work behind it too. Where did all this begin for you?
Oh man, I mean, how far do you want to go back? I mean, I've been reading comics since I was a kid. I think early on I wanted to be a creator, but kind of moved away from it. I was a teacher for my first part of my career, 5 years, before going to the Kubert School and being like, I'm going to make the jump and become a creator. That was 2003 to 2006. And coming out of the school, I just formed A Wave Blue World, my own, label, studio, small publisher, whatever you want to call it. I started putting out titles independently, kickstarting anthologies, like you mentioned, writing short stories, anything from short stories to self-contained graphic novels to long-running series like MEZO, which we're just started its 3rd volume now. I'm breaking that up into 5-issue runs, collect a book, 5-issue run, collect a book, and so this is the start of the 3rd one.
And I mean, it has to feel amazing to hold it in your hand, to see all what this world's coming to, and especially to have a co-creator taking on the Trial of Roden as well. I mean, how did it feel handing off your baby to another creator?
Man, good. And I mean, there's, pros and cons, positive. I mean, overall, very, very good, very excited about it. But yeah, I mean, as you said, it's like I've started so many threads and these characters have really come to life, for me. So having somebody else take them in their own direction, and I'm really excited to work with Jared. I think he's great. His strengths are really adding to the book. Like, I think we do mix very well. But just when he has his own ideas, or let's try this, and I feel like I'm open to a lot of things, but also I'm just like, okay, well, let me just explain to you what I was thinking with these characters, and maybe we can kind of come. I mean, I think the more we communicate and really understand where we're coming from, rather than just, here's an idea, let's run with it or something. Okay, let's kind of like just meld everything together. So, it's going to be a process, but overall, it's just been such a positive on this series. It's added so much energy to it. A lot more depth. I mean, he's so good with characters. He's really like, I need to make sure we hit these emotional touch points for every plot point, and I just love the plot point, keep it going. I really like to keep things moving, and I'm all plot and how things intertwine. And he's like, we need to make people feel this point before we move on, or what's the emotional resonance in this moment, and conversations between the husband and wife, like Roden's on trial and he's got his wife, and those conversations he's really just strengthened what they're saying. And where I just like to, I'm very like the dialogue, I like to keep that very sparse, and maybe I lean into that too much, where it's just like, they don't need to say much, you get it, let's move on, kind of thing. And that is good, but like, if you want readers to be right there in that moment with those characters, they need to be able to express themselves a little bit more. So I think that's what people maybe find with this one. If you've read the first 2 volumes, you might be like, wow, this one's really getting much more of an emotional punch, which I think is good.
Is it your first time working with a creator on this level of collaboration? I know anthologies, anthologies are a little bit different, but something of this magnitude, was it your first time?
Well, I've actually co-written a couple things with my wife, so it's different than that. But outside of the home, this is the first time co-writing with someone. And I think my wife has a very similar, thing where I love the plot, and she can put in more of the character and dialogue type thing. So that's probably just where my strength versus my need for somebody else to come in comes in.
So give us a little bit about the world of MEZO. I mean, with 3 volumes out, I'm sure there is a lot of back history to explore, but I mean, just I guess the elevator pitch for it.
Well, the elevator pitch is a Mesoamerican inspired fantasy series. So you're going to get a lot of things that on one hand you're familiar with, like Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones, but we've set it in a Mesoamerican inspired world. So more Aztec, Mayan, Inca, that type of thing. Now it is a fantasy world, so it's not history. And I thought it was nice to sort of, get away from that history, the whole European influence, the Cortez, invasion, that type of thing, and just be like, let this world exist on its own, and within it, it's a battle of civilizations because you have tribes that are, a little more just sort of open and living off the land and don't have the big aspirations, and then you have the one, empire that sort of rose up and, came up with their god and want to dominate over the rest of them. So that's where you get that sort of conflict of, should one society dominate over the rest, or are we going to keep this sort of equal and open and everybody having their own, more idealized? So yeah, that's sort of the pitch there.
For everyone watching, right here is the link to a website to buy issue 1 of The Trial of Roden, as well as the other issues of MEZO, I'm assuming.
You can get the volumes, the collected trade of volume 1 and volume 2. I don't have those as individual issues anymore. My feeling there is they're kind of for the new when they're on the stands. I mean, I guess you can back issue collect, but I tend not to keep them in stock. I print just a little over what I get ordered through Diamond just to have at some shows as they come out. But once they're collected, that's pretty much all I sell anyway.
It's funny. When I was younger and I first started really, there's a lot of different stages in my life where I got into comics. But the final stage where I stayed into comics, I was such I don't know if I'd call myself a snob, but I preferred getting those single issues, the floppies, and getting every single one. But now I'm an old weathered man. I'm tired. I'm cranky. Something about those trade paperbacks, those graphic novels, I could just read them. I don't have to worry about bending up a floppy or carrying 6 of them. It just hits differently.
Yeah, I keep going back and forth myself in terms of what I like to give, because the comics do come out first and they're fresh and you get them right off the stand, and that's fun. And you can see
the smell.
Have a few of that. Oh yeah. So I'm glad they're still around. But yeah, when you really want to get into a story and be like, okay, I want to see what happens, where this develops, I think reading them in trade paperback size makes a little bit more sense. So, I use the floppies as more of try new things out. Every once in a while, I'll read like the full 5-issue, 8-issue run or whatever of something. But for the most part, if I think it's something I want to read, I'll wait for the book to come out and get it that way. So, and that's sort of how I tailored MEZO. Like, let's do the issues for fun, for people who want to grab them. You do some cool variant covers, not to get crazy with that, but just a chance to get something by Chris Sheehan and Maria Wolf. I couldn't resist that. So, that's fun. But once we have the books, the goal is to have the nice bookshelf size spine, for the different volumes. Just like the fantasy books and stuff I read as a kid.
So we talked a little bit about the elevator pitch of MEZO in the world. Let's talk a bit about the protagonist and maybe the villain as well. I mean, what type of cast are we looking at within this world?
Well, there's a good amount of characters. So even though Roden, the focus is sort of on him in this issue, and he sort of embodies like this traditional protagonist because he's a soldier, he's dedicated to his wife and kids, he just wants peace, through war, but that's how he wants to get peace. But he's put on trial in this issue, and that actually gave a chance to me to get other characters out there, and we're almost seeing this trial through the other characters' perspective. What does Roden mean to them?
Yeah.
Do they want to save him? Do they, how do they judge him? That sort of thing. So it allowed the other characters to flourish around him. He may be the central sort of character because he's the one on trial. But while he's locked away waiting for this trial, we see everybody else. Are they going to save him? Do they believe him? Do they think he needs to repent? That sort of thing.
I really like the different ends of the spectrum with it as well, where some revel in the fact that he's a hero. And obviously, you know, the other guys do not think so as much. What was his role in the previous issues? Was he the main focus in the Volume 1 and Volume 2 of MEZO?
Well, it definitely started off with a nice scene with him and his family in the first page of Volume 1. Again, it's a cast of characters, so I wouldn't say that necessarily one is more than the other. Again, he sort of embodies, he takes that role as that soldier, but I mean, you have the different tribes, you have lots of, you know, interconnections at play here. So yeah, no, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say like it's all about Roden, right? You know, but I do think he's an interesting character because he got himself sort of caught on the right side by being such this loyal, dedicated, good soldier and doing what his emperor has decreed and following his god or whatever. He's kind of found himself in a tight situation, you know, in the previous volume, Battle of Koban Rock, where, all right, it's one thing to defeat your enemies or whatever, but how far do you take it? Because their god had sort of decreed that they needed to all be wiped clean from this land, right? They were supposed to get rid of them. And it got to a certain point. It's like, okay, we won the battle. They're running off now. Like, we're supposed to chase them down and just slaughter them. Like, that's where, you know, his own conscience sort of came at play. Whereas the more zealot type followers were like, well, no, we have to do, the only way we'll be safe is if we kill them all type thing. And, you know, so that's when he decided mercy was better than extermination. And that's why he's being put on trial, because as their emperor has told them, their god has decreed, like he has left them in danger. It wasn't enough just to defeat them, you know, the fact that they just exist. So yeah, that's sort of that. And one of the big themes is these cycles of revenge, you know, every time you, defeat one person, you know, what if the next generation or their children grow up hating you or thinking you're the oppressor? You know, when does that cycle start? And you know, is there a way to repair something after a war or a battle? And, you know, and that's just one of the themes we're going to continue to explore.
And perspective is such a deep thing to look at and to write about. I feel like how, you know, on one end of the stick, you could feel like you're doing the right thing, but in the views, you know, of the other people, you're a monster. And I really like how you guys chose to dive into that. Now, we were talking earlier about how these interiors are just gorgeous. Who's the creative team involved with this?
So on the art, I mean, Val Rodriguez, who joined us in Volume 1 and did all of Volume 2 and is now in Volume 3. He was just on a series called Unnatural Order from Vol in between Volume 2 and 3, but he's back working on this one after that. He's just an amazing artist. He was when I first picked him up and saw his work on an earlier series and was like, please do MEZO. He's only gotten better with each new volume of MEZO. The great work on Unnatural Order, which I have to give a shout out to. And now that he's on Volume 3, I mean, this is just his best work. Yeah, I mean, you'd mention some of these like foliage scenes or whatever. You know,
here,
doing
hold on,
really creative designs.
We'll get you a large layout there.
Yeah.
All right.
And then, yeah, sorry, let me show that. Yeah, really interesting stuff with the panel work. No, he's doing some amazing work. And then Gab is coloring him. I really like Gab's colors on his work for the main timeline. But then we have another artist, Tommy Varia, who's does the flashbacks, which gives it, you know, more of a, you know, you're supposed to think, well, this happened like 12 years ago. So yeah, it gives it a different feel.
And that sky is gorgeous too. The purples and blues in it.
Yeah, yeah, I love this for like the past timeline. You know, really just beautiful stuff. And then you pop into this more vivid colors for the main timeline, and it certainly makes for a good contrast. So, yeah, it's great working with those two different colorists, both on Val's artwork. Just some amazing artwork coming in.
We have a question for you in chat from Caleb York. Tyler, since revenge is a big theme in the book, do you have any favorite revenge stories, comics, or otherwise? Good question.
Yeah, no, revenge stories are great. Geez, you know, I mean, True Grit is always my favorite revenge story. I always love that. I read the novel and the book, the novel and the book and the movie. That I think that's probably one of my favorites right there. I'm trying to think if there's ones in comics too. I'm sure there are. But yeah, no, I mean, with this one, I just wanted to unpack revenge a little bit. Like, it is good, but like at some point, we need to break the cycle. We can't just have like revenge and then revenge on top of each other. So,
Are you
sort of,
are you a gamer at all?
I'm not. No,
I was.
I had the original Nintendo system when I was in 8th grade, and I was obsessed, and I wasn't getting anything done. I was, wasn't getting my schoolwork done. Well, I had played sports and stuff too, and I was like, I get so obsessed. Like, that's the thing. I would be somebody who was obsessed with it. Like, and I'm just like, I need to commit that energy somewhere else. So I kind of, other than like playing Tetris here and there.
Hey, they don't make TVs like they used to either. I'll say that. I would take a CRT over a HDMI any day.
So yeah, no, I haven't played anything from like the original Zelda and Super Mario and all those Quest games. Since
I was gonna say the Last of Us Part 2 had such an interesting revenge story where the protagonist, of course, loses everything. And it's like those feel like the best because it's like there's always a lesson to be learned about, your reaction and how you go about, doing your reaction and what that could lead to and how even when you get it, it might not be everything you wanted. It might be the absolute opposite and make everything worse. So this is such a beautiful series. We have 5 issues. When's issue 2 dropping?
On June 10th, I don't know what, Wednesday, something about that on a Wednesday. I think it's the 10th. Oh, actually, it says in the back here. Yeah, if you get a copy of number 1, you can see. Oh no, June 5th. Ooh, hope I can make that date. These are the covers. Oops, sorry. These are the covers for number 2. You see Val's cover and Chris Sheehan's cover down here too. So yeah, that's a great issue. I'm really excited for that. That really gets some new ideas in there and some reveals. So I'm excited for that to hit the stands too.
So what can we expect without spoiling from this series going forward?
Well, if you've been reading it up until this point, you find out some really interesting information about some of the characters. Maybe it's not quite how it seems. And, the people who hold power aren't necessarily the ones who are manipulating it. But we also have some interesting new directions. With volume 3, we do come to a bit of a conclusion, but it's not a complete end, and we change some directions here and there. And I'm really curious and excited to see, what will happen. Funny, I said curious, and when I'm one of the creators, I'm curious to see where this goes from here.
We're literally writing this page by page. You guys have no idea.
Yeah, and that's what the great thing about working with Jared and Val and things like that is they have some influence on it too. But yeah, I think readers are going to be intrigued, both satisfied with the ending of volume 3 in terms of what we've set up, but also intrigued to see where else this is going to be going from here.
So diving back into MEZO, what does that collaboration look like? Between you and Jared, and then you and Jared and the artist. Like, how do you guys all work together as a team?
So yeah, I mean, that's something we've been learning on this series. I viewed volume 3, especially since it was the conclusion of this sort of trilogy, as being Jared and I learning how we want to work together, probably collaborating sort of the most, or at least with my involvement. In future, I'd like to sort of stay on for co-plotting, but like really let Jared take it in the direction that he wants to take it, and let him loose a little bit more. Because in this one, I was just like, well, here's what I've been building up until this point. So yes, I do want your voice in there and you to bring some thoughts, but I had so much like already plotted out, and I was like, don't like add to it or tweak it a little bit, but like just sort of take what my threads here and see what you can do with it. So for the most part, it was me presenting how we had gotten to this point, and where I think this really should sort of come to an end, and him, responding to that, being like, can we just try this a little bit differently here, a little bit differently there, and then let me flesh out some things. And so, yeah, it really is sort of more like plot versus script and story and dialogue for him. So, in that way, it's kind of a clean, collaboration. We do go back and forth a lot because he'll make comments and I'll make comments based off of his, and we try to keep the progress going. Like, okay, that's a good idea. Let's build on that, and same thing back and forth, rather than just shooting down that idea and going backwards, right? Like if we're progressing together, that's better than just knocking each other back. But it's a process. It's a learning process, and I think we're getting better at it. And I think we both really enjoy it, which is the important thing. We don't look at it as a negative at all. We're just, this is going to help the series. Both of us, it's all about the story, right? It's not about me. It's not about getting my message out. And I think Jared's the same thing. If this is helping the story and the reader's experience, then we're all for it.
And then how does that work with the artist? I mean, these interiors are very detailed, gorgeous. I mean, do you guys usually have a script that you want the artist to stick to, or is the artist kind of free to do their own thing?
Yes and no. So we'll get all our scripts sorted first. We don't want to send a mess to Val. We want it very clear, especially since English isn't his first language. So in terms of sending in a very polished, finished script, we absolutely do that. That doesn't mean there isn't room for layout for Val to make creative choices in his layouts and camera angles and perspectives and things like that. We don't dictate how a page should necessarily look, but we want the story to be very clear. Like, this is what we're trying to tell here, Val. And it's not really, I know some maybe writers, artists, like the artist can really change up the story or things like that. Like, I wouldn't say, there's enough going on with Jared and that for us to come up with what we want the story to be, that we just sort of let Val make the visual choices for how the story, which is what artists do. I mean, they do tell the story visually. That's what you see. That's how it lays it out there. But we're just more like, well, this is what we want the story to be. You go express it, visually.
Awesome. So everyone that is watching, right here is a link to get issue 1. Issue 1's out today, and then issue 2 is dropping on June 5th. So be sure to get your pre-orders in. If you're unable to buy or pre-order, simply put that link on Twitter and Facebook. Word of mouth is 100% free and it costs you nothing to do. And sharing is caring. So let's go ahead and dive into a Wave Blue world. Since we've talked about MEZO, let's finish it off with what you do as a publisher as well.
Too much. It's quite the job. I mean, I really enjoy the process of making a comic book from start to finish. And since I put so much of my heart and soul in the creative side of it, it's nice to be able to decide, like, when it comes out, how it comes out, that sort of thing. But it does give me a lot of extra jobs to do. I do have some staff who I work with to help me out, especially things that aren't my strengths, design, advertising, marketing, sales, things like that. But yeah, I just run this little outfit from here, my office in here, and put together the files, send them off the printer, send those to the distributors, go online, do all that social media and marketing stuff as best I can, reach out to stores. It's nice to see how it's done. I wouldn't want any of that to be a mystery or feel like it wasn't being transparent if I was working with a publisher. So, for now it's working great for me. I could see myself developing into maybe more of a creative studio where I make the work and work with a publisher to get it out there. But for now, I just really kind of enjoy learning all this stuff. And the industry's been such a, interesting place. I think there's always been its challenges, but now we have all this like crowdfunding and all digital and things like that. It's interesting to see where we're going to go with that. And so I think just staying light and flexible as a small publisher just really helps us roll with the changes and try different things.
That is awesome. What can we expect from you guys this month?
This month is a big month. Well, MEZO came out, yesterday, so that's on stands. But we also have an anthology coming out on the 22nd, Becoming Who We Are. We've sort of established a tradition of doing progressive culturally relevant anthologies. You know, we have Young Men in Love, Color of Always, even Sharp Wit. And so this is real stories about growing up trans. 9 people from the trans community share their story of their life, kind of a positive example. Not that they haven't gone through trials and tribulations, and a lot of them just like any kids growing up. But it's meant to show like, hey, we're real people. These are real experiences, and hopefully serve as positive inspiration for people going through or considering or just knowing people going through the same thing. So that comes out at the end of May, you know, into June. And so that's, you know, we've got between our fantasy series and our, you know, progressive anthology, those are pretty much the 2 areas that we're hitting, you know, this year and hopefully in future years.
We have our good friend John from Part-Time Comics stopping in to throw in some love. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate it. So Tyler, before we wrap things up, I always love asking 2 questions in particular, and that is a piece of advice and what you're consuming outside of creating. So for anyone looking to pick up the pencil for the first time and start their script, start putting their ideas to paper, what would be the biggest piece of advice you could offer them?
Ooh, okay. Geez.
No pressure.
From the very beginning. Well, I mean, I figure most people who are writing are trying to balance it with other things, right? And I think there's this pressure that when you start, that all of a sudden you have to be, you know, commit tons of hours and make that switch like right away. And to an extent, sure, the more work you put in, the better you're going to get. But I think what you want to do that is consistency rather than this enormous big push at the beginning. So come up with a sustainable time period where you can get away from all distractions, other responsibilities, other jobs, computer, social media. It can start small. I mean, do a half hour, do an hour, whatever you can afford. Just make that consistent and just keep showing up each day. I wouldn't worry about production. Again, people set goals and that's great, but just make it about getting yourself into that headspace every day, seeing what comes out. Just eliminate the distractions or things like that. Even if you write 2 words or if you stare at a wall, that's fine. Staring at the wall is part of the process. Don't let it be a computer or TV, but staring at the wall is writing, right? Because even if the story isn't there, it's something that you have to get through. So I don't know, was that a very long?
Yes, no, that was good. That was good. Any advice is good advice, I feel. That's one of my favorite parts about interviewing creators is everybody has a story to tell and everybody offers something that you probably don't know. You just have to dig a little bit to find it. So Tyler, I know you said you didn't play video games, but what books and what, you know, TV shows are you watching? Maybe movies that you've been, you know, checking out?
Oh man. Geez, well, I mean, I think my wife and I try to watch a show like most evenings. I just watched The Bear and all of Succession, which were probably 2 of the greatest shows I've ever seen. Both of those
I heard The Bear was really good.
Oh, it's so good. Yeah, that was great. We're in a show called The 3-Body Problem right now. Have you heard of that one?
So as far as shows go, I'm not watching anything relevant. I usually am too busy keeping it geekly stuff and comic book Yeti stuff, to be honest. What have I watched? I watch more movies. I think I don't know if you've seen A Quiet Place to Die. Is it it's something like that. There's a part 1 or part 2, and the dude from The Office is in it.
Oh, okay.
And it was so good. It's a horror movie about not being able to make a sound. So it's like that Bird Box where you can't look, but you can't make a sound. And it's like, what do you do when you get sick? You know, what do you do when you sneeze? And like, they get gruesomely murdered. I'm not a freak, everyone, but I do love a good show where people just get gruesomely teared apart. Like, it's just...
Yeah,
Tyler's like, I'm never coming back on this show again.
Yeah, I remember seeing that. You know, I always have a tough time with horror because I know I would like it, especially if they're good, but it's hard for me to choose to be terrified after a long day. I don't know. That's not like, it doesn't immediately appeal to me once I'm in it. So same thing with like sort of serious dramas. Like sometimes I just want to watch a comedy, but it's like once I get into it, I know that I'll really enjoy it. we've been watching more TV shows just because we need like less than an hour per sitting. Like we don't have more than that. So unless we want to break a movie up. So I think that's why we've been doing more of that. I've been watching the X-Men, the new X-Men.
I need to check it out too. Yeah. The House of Usher, I think, or the Fall of the House of Usher was maybe the last series that I watched in its entirety. That was a really interesting one. It's you really don't know what's going on in the beginning, but then you start to they leave the breadcrumbs and you start picking it up and piecing it together, and then you start like calling the shots like as you get closer to the end. It's a pretty good series. So if you haven't seen that, but that's still a little bit more towards the horror side. I don't know. Probably maybe not check that out after a long day.
That would be cool. I mean, I read the Edgar Allan Poe story, so I don't remember exactly. It's probably been a while, but I do like his stuff. So that I'd be interested to see how that gets adapted. I
think I'm caving in and watching The Bear finally, though. Enough people have said how good it is. I need to.
It's really good, and one of the interesting things about it is the guy who's going to play the Thing in Fantastic Four. You know, Ben Grimm. He's in that show, and he's a character that really grows on you. So, because you started off, you're like, oh, you know, whatever, this guy's kind of a jerk or not so great. But he really has a great story arc in it, and that actor does a great job. So, excited to see what he does with Ben Grimm.
Yeah, to give you an idea, like, shoot, I just started Shameless maybe a couple months ago. To give you an idea of how backed up I am with TV shows, that's probably my biggest thing that I'm lacking. But, you know, time is a rare currency, and there's not enough time in the day. And with that being said, I do have to get ready for a nice 12-hour shift. So Tyler, thank you so much for making this happen. We set this up on the fly. I appreciate the flexibility. Everyone watching, help support this book. Check it out right here on this link. Be sure to buy issue 1, pre-order issue 2, and if you can't share that on Facebook and Twitter, word of mouth costs you absolutely nothing. Hope you all have a fantastic Thursday, but most importantly, keep it geekly.